Please pause the video to complete the review. After the review is completed, restart the video to watch the rest of the presentation. Alright, so what we're going to be looking at is the Constitution. Okay, that's what this next section is. That's what we'll be going over. The thing about our Constitution, it's the oldest in the world. I talked about it being pretty important in the fact that we're still using the same Constitution. A lot of other countries have gone through several in their histories, which are a lot longer than ours. But in our brief history, we've had this one Constitution. We're ignoring the articles at this point. And a lot of it has to do with the brevity, how brief the Constitution is. It's not very long, it's not very wordy, and it's very ambiguous. It's very vague about a lot of the information that is in it, and a lot of the powers that are there. And that's what's led to a lot of issues throughout history, and that's what the Supreme Court comes into the situation with interpreting the Constitution. You see here the picture there: high school students pray outside their school before classes begin for the day. This type of prayer has been upheld by the courts. The Supreme Court struck down student-led prayer broadcast over a stadium loudspeaker before a high school football game. You should think about why that might be, and if you'd like to pause the video and have a brief discussion about why that might be, go ahead and do so. So let's go through the parts of the Constitution. Okay? So the Constitution, it's a framework for how the government is going to work. It's a framework for our government. It's the highest authority in the U.S. and it's the basic law. Okay? And of course, there are three branches of the government, and their power comes directly from the Constitution. Hopefully, you know what the three branches are. If you don't, you will pretty soon, because we're going to go over. So there are three parts. There's the preamble. We're going to have an activity. You're going to do an activity with the preamble. Where you're going to read it and answer some questions. And that's just the introduction, though. States the goals, the purpose of the government. There are the 7 articles. You're going to need to know the 7 articles. Particularly the first 3 are very important. And that's just the structure of the government. And then there are the amendments. There are 27 current amendments. Of course, the first 10 are known as the, I'm sure someone said it, Bill of Rights. Okay, preamble, that just says, where the power of the government comes from. It comes from the people. That's why it says we the people of the United States. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. You're going to have, like I said, you're going to have an activity to do with the preamble. And that's, breaks down the preamble here. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is part of the activity you'll be doing. Okay, so let's talk about the branches. Let's talk about the articles here. We're going to spend the most time we'll spend is going to be with Article 1 because that's the longest article because it's the most important branch in the eyes of the founders. Okay, and so Article 1 deals with the legislative branch. That's the one they thought should be the #1 branch, have the most power, and have the most powers actually too. They can do more than the other branches. So legislative branch in the first article, it's the leading branch according to the founders, although we have kind of twisted that around. We seem to think the president's more important nowadays. Creates that bicameral legislature we've been talking about with the House and Senate. And it lists the specific powers Congress does and doesn't have, like taxes, which they didn't have under the articles, regulate trade, specifically interstate trade or interstate commerce, which again they didn't have under the articles, create or coin money, again, something they didn't have under the articles. Notice that this fixes immediately a lot of the articles issues, and they have the power to declare war. Okay, some things they can't do: they can't tax a state's exports, and they can't favor one state over another. So Article 2 is over the executive branch. That is just providing for president and vice president to execute or enforce the laws. All right. So it describes how the president and vice president should be elected and removed. So in other words, the electoral college is explained in there. Impeachment is explained in here. Describes presidential powers. There is not a specific list like in Article 1. Article 1, Section 8 is a specific list of powers for the legislative branch. Here, there's not a specific list. There's a set of kind of vague paragraph of powers talking about that. One of the ones that it does mention, though, is that the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. At the point at which the Constitution was written, of course, that was an army and a navy, but that has come to include an air force. It does say the president deals with leaders of other countries and does appoint certain government officials, though a lot of the government officials that the president currently appoints are not listed in there because they are not mentioned in the Constitution at all. Then Article 3 leaves us with the judicial branch. So they're the ones that interpret the laws, see that they're fairly applied, calls for one Supreme Court. All right. That's the only court that's really mentioned in the Constitution. Sets up that Congress can create all the others, and they do in one of their first big legislative acts. But the only real constitutionally established court is the Supreme Court. And it does describe the kind of cases that courts may hear. That is, the word for that is jurisdiction. Okay, jurisdiction. All right, Articles 4 through 7. Not as important as the first three, but a few of these are more important than other ones. Like Article 7 is not terribly important to us now, at least. Article 6 is pretty big. You need to pay attention to that. So is 5 and 4. Actually, 4, 5, and 6 are pretty important. 7 is the one that's, was important at one point, and nowadays, it just is. All right. So Article 4 just talks about how all states must respect the laws, court decisions, and records of other states. That's why the Supreme Court decision this summer about gay marriage is such a big deal, because if every state's supposed to respect the laws of every other state, they do with most marriage licenses. That's why I remember I got married on a mountain, Colorado. When I came back to Georgia, I didn't have to get married again because Georgia respected my marriage certificate from Colorado. But what if one state, says that one type of marriage, specifically gay marriage, is not legal or valid, and another state says it is, and you move from the state where it is to the state where it's not? What happens? Does the state have to respect the laws? And that was one of the big constitutional issues that was solved this summer by the Supreme Court. Article 5 specifies how the Constitution may be amended. We will talk specifically about that. This is how it becomes a living document. It can be changed as needed. And we will talk specifically how we propose amendments, how amendments are ratified, and we'll do an activity with that as well. That's something we'll discuss later in this presentation, in more depth at least. And Article 6 says the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That's called the Supremacy Clause. Make sure you remember that. Article 6 is where the Supremacy Clause comes from. And that means federal law beats state law every time. Okay? That's where that idea of nullification was proven, wrong, when they sit there and said that a state can nullify a federal law. They can't. The Supremacy Clause has said that from the beginning. And then Article 7, the one I said is not that important, and is because it just told us when the Constitution would be ratified, when it would go into effect. That was, remember, after 9 states accepted it. So that's why it's important. It was important then, but we kind of ignore it now because it doesn't do anything else. Then don't forget, there are the amendments. There are 27 total. The last one was passed in the 90s. I believe that was exactly when it was, to look at the date. It was about congressional pay raises. Nothing terribly exciting. Of course, the first 10, we know them as the Bill of Rights. We'll talk a lot about them later on. Yeah. So let's stop here, and we'll come back and we'll have another one of these presentations that'll continue here. Okay.